Hey!
What up, guys?
Hey! It's been a while.
Oh my god, my hair is see-through.
What the fuck did you do?
It's because my hair is blue. Hang on tight. You forgot to change your name too.
Oh.
Hello.
Hi.
There we go. That works good.
I'm trying, man. I'm trying here.
Oh, you're good.
Talking
You're good. There's a reason that we call it the Friday fuck.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yep.
You can hear me? You devil looking man.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
I try to look my most beautiful. Oh, you're good. There's a reason why we call this the Friday Fuckery Show.
Yeah.
It's nice. I like it.
No, nothing actually goes according to plan.
Nope.
Ever. So how are you doing, man?
I'm good. I just I'm the proud new downloader of Google Chrome because I go to get on and that's it. My website says, or the thing comes up and says, I'm not compatible for this, and I'm like, shit. And so anyway, you need Google Chrome. I didn't have Google Chrome. I don't know these things. I'm old, man.
Oh yeah, you ain't that old, man. You all right?
Yeah, I feel good, man. I feel real good.
Good. So what you got going on musically?
Well, I'm doing this Apocalypse Blues revival thing, and the Big Machine Godsmack we're very close to chest right now. We're writing, and we never rush these things. We never have. Usually our records come out like 4 years apart, right? And so we're kind of being purposely, hermit secluded ourselves, and we're writing lots of material. And I'm not supposed to really say any more sullies. It says, man, we're going to keep this thing close to our chest and let it develop. And luckily we have time, and that shit all went down last year and the world changed. And so, we had luckily put our record out in 2018 at the end of that year. And so we had 2019 and we just pounded it, did the 3 world tours, like all the way around the world 3 times, and just stayed on the road and, supported and toured the shit out of that Legends Rise record. And so it was when the pandemic hit, we had, going into 2020, we had like some really cool festivals like opening for Metallica and some cool shit going on, but it was just basically we were doing that for fun and because we love to play live and just going for it. The record was still doing okay and whatever. And then the pandemic hit, so we kind of were just like not really screwed. Like I feel sorry for bands that put records out right in 2020 and then they're like go to tour and support it and they're like, what? The whole world stopped and shut music down. So we basically took that whole year of 2020 off and just sat at home like probably everybody else going, it's a madhouse out there, man. And everybody just like, wrote music themselves. Like we didn't even get together as a band through the whole pandemic. And I went crazy and just, having not, it'd been since I was 12 years old that I hadn't toured or played a show in a year. Like ever since I was 12, I started playing, keg parties and whatever. By the time I was 13, I was playing in clubs, covers, AC/DC and Black Sabbath, all that shit. And so, ever since then, I've never done anything else. I always just played drums, been in bands. It's been my life, right? And then all of a sudden, I found myself here in Florida, home, with no shows, no schedule. Yep, you're off until this shit blows over. And I was like, damn. And so I had a koi pond, and I ended up like a friend just made a comment, a joke kind. I was going to put a second koi pond in the back of my yard. And it's like 150 feet back away from it. A second one where I go and chill and write lyrics and meditate, whatever. And he's like, yeah, you should hook the two ponds together with a like lazy river through your yard. And I was like, he was joking, but I was like, is that feasible, man? And so, and I made it happen. It's a rad thing, and it took basically throughout that whole year of 2020, I was just like, literally, I worked harder than I ever worked in my life, just digging and planting all this bamboo and trying to make this like Zen backyard garden, Japanese gardens / satanic potpourri. I don't know. It's fucking. It turned out really cool. I'm really happy with it.
Panic Japanese garden.
Younger,
Right?
made me younger.
Oh, so that's the Fountain of Youth is your backyard?
Yeah, I wish I could show it to you, right now, but it's dark out and it's lit up and stuff. But I've tried to do it, and on a podcast actually, and I was on with the drummer from Pearl Jam, Dave Abruzzese, right, the first guy, and on a podcast, and he showed us his yard, and he has this beautiful porch and all this. And I was like, wow, but it was dark here, and he was on the West Coast or whatever, and it was dark. And I walked out to show everybody, and you can't see shit, or else I'd show you right now. But
you're like, look at the darkness. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
You can't see shit, but it's there. It's really there. I promise you.
But I got like these, I got 29 koi, and I had 23, and then they had babies, which I didn't even plan or try and breed. I don't breed these things. And then I have a separate turtle pond that I dug myself. I'd never driven a backhoe, but it's pandemic, man. I was like, hey, YouTube, Home Depot's open, and so
no better time to learn.
I dug this thing, man, myself, made this turtle pond. I got a bunch of turtles. I can show you a couple of my guys. They're swimming around. I just fed here.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, sweet.
But that's a Maryland terrapin, diamondback terrapin. Oh, now it's losing me. But anyway, these are albino red-eared sliders and Mississippi map turtles in there. But I fell in love with these turtles. And I've had turtles for about 4 years and koi for 3 years, 3.5 years of the turtles, 4 years for the koi. And I always loved them, but over the pandemic, I really just became obsessed with them. And a bobcat bit the tail off one of my koi fish, and so I put all these like laser lights and shit in the yard to try and keep the bobcats from eating my fish, and put one of those enforcer things, it makes a racket and shoots water all over the yard. Anyway, it turns out I'm calling around. I don't know. You can't take a fish to the vet. You know what I mean? And so as it is today with YouTube, I go on YouTube, how do I fix a hurt koi? I mean, it took a bite out of ripped its tail off. You can see the bones sticking out of this fish's tail.
God.
It's still alive, it's still alive. And Jesus, they're like, it's like 4 feet long, or 3 feet long. It's a big fish. So I get in the pond. Firstly, I go on, again, YouTube. Nowadays, you can do anything you want, right? So I'm like, I got to operate on the fish. Dr. Apocalypse in the house. And so, I ordered this kit from Germany that I saw this German dude fix one of his fish that got attacked by like a blue heron, And so, my attack was different, but still, it looked like it came with sedation. So I had to set these exterior ponds up that I have. They're like the size of like kiddie pools, And I got in one of them. You put the sedation in, then you need one for after you cleanse and perform the whatever. It's not really. I didn't really operate. I'm not a doctor or some shit, but I mean, I did have to go in there, get the fish in my hands, and put it into this tank with sedation in it, and then when you wait like 3-4 minutes, when it starts to go sideways, they drown. So you have to like grab it when it starts going sideways. The fish is out, right? But so I grab it and I'm running over to this table with lights and stuff, and a sterile area, and the fish flopping again. So anyway, I end up, I put the fish down, antibacterial the wound, and then there was this like molasses type liquid, that you kind of seal, but you have to completely dry it. And the fish, even knocked out, it was still flopping. And I was like, holy crap, man, I'm operating on this fish here. Broad daylight. It was weird, man. Next thing you know, I got, my girlfriend was pouring like, water in the gills they can survive. They breathe oxygen, but they get it from the water. So if you pull a koi fish out of the water, they can survive for like 5 to 7 minutes. You have to keep them, in a wet towel, and anyway, dry the wound completely. I put this like molasses type shit over the wound, and it kind of like sealed it up. And then it was like when I put the fish back in the water in a holding tank, because it was still out, and then I had to watch it for a few minutes, make sure, and put my hand in there, keep it upright so it doesn't drown. Then it started to come out of the wonderful high it was feeling, and but when I put it in the pond, the liquid, like molasses, thick liquid at the end, the sealant, it's like if you take hot wax and put it underwater and it gets hard, so it got hard around the thing and sealed it, and then like in 3 to 4 days it started like chipping off this like wax almost on the back. And as it was chipping off, the fish, which happens to be white, it
I think we lost him.
I think we lost him too.
It's okay. We can sit here and talk for a minute until he comes back.
Shannon, come back.
It's all good.
Yeah, in the meantime, if you guys are in the comments, feel free to ask questions for us to ask Shannon. Shannon is stuck.
Yeah, he's kind of frozen there, but it's okay. We'll get him back here momentarily. Unfortunately, technology does not like us.
No, it doesn't.
Well played.
Oh, there he is. He's back.
I'm trying to get. I had to move. It said, move closer to your routers. So now I'm in my bedroom. My router's actually in my bedroom, so I'm going to be in my bedroom.
That's right. Okay.
So, all right. And look over my bed. You guys will love this. That's my Venom poster. It's a real poster.
Heck yeah. That's awesome.
I don't know. Saw the pentagram. Thought maybe you guys like Venom. I do.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. We do. Definitely do.
Yeah.
So right. What you got going on with your new band?
Well, we put a record out in December of 2020, and it was one of these things where Godsmack's label is BMG, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a great label, and we love that label, and they're super sweet, and really good for us and all, whatever. It was the last record successful on that label. Our first record on BMG, right? And we had been on Universal for our whole career. And then that ended in, we went to BMG. And so anyway, these cats, I went to them, I recorded the record. Like, I just went ahead and paid for it or whatever. It's my like personal band. It's not for record sales. It's not for anything else. I'm in Godsmack, I don't need anything. So
Yeah.
I have all I want and more. But but what I don't have is like this outlet for an alternative psychedelic blues type music that isn't commercial friendly or anything. But there's like-minded folks out there that dig this kind of music. I think. I mean, I know it, and like people like Gary Clark Jr. or Alabama Shakes or Government Mule, even Kenny Wayne Shepherd Band. These are what acts that we think we kind of fit in with, but I don't think we really sound like any of them. But we're trying to do our own thing, is all. And so BMG was going to put it out for us, and then the pandemic hit, and they're like, shit, we can't release this for you until fall of 2021, which would have been this year. And we made the thing, and at the end of 2019 we had recorded the record and whatever. And so I was like, I went to Godsmack's manager, Paul Geary, and I was like, and BMG, of course, said, since it's the pandemic and, we're at the bottom of a totem pole, we're a side project or whatever. And so we have all these other bands now we have to put out before we get to the apocalypse, right? And so I was just like, well, if I'm free to do it, I'll just do it myself. And you can hire like a entertainment kind of company, that will, they get all the stuff that you need to like put a record out. And I guess it's pretty easy now where they hire like a publicist, I guess, and like we found the vinyl making, this place makes killer vinyl. It's in the Czech Republic, I think. And it's like this killer splatter vinyl on the big, thick 180 groove. And so the records, they turned out really good, everything, but it was self-financed, right? So I'd never done that before. It was my 38th record in 36 years that I've made. No, right? I was like,
that's a lot of work.
Yeah, a lot of play, man. But I'm old as shit. That seems like, God damn it. But anyway,
So,
so,
as early as you have it, that I'm sure that's why it seems that way.
Yeah. So I was like, man, I want to get. In retrospect, I kind of made a mistake, whether it was vanity or whatever. But I wanted to have the record come out in 2020, and no matter what. So I was like, if I got to pay for it myself and put it out ourselves. So the label, it's ABR Records. That's what we did, Apocalypse Blues Revival Records, and self-financed to get it out in 2020, because I feel like, because obviously, like, we hired the Syndicate in LA, which is a publicist, and they had Taco Bell, like, it's a major thing, and like they were put this whole projection of like how many hits that we need to get on Spotify to sell. We're looking at selling like 5,000 records. Like, my goal is low because I know that I don't care about. I'm in Godsmack again. I gotta stress that because that is a lucky thing, man. It gives me, a outlet that I would normally. I'd be a starving musician if I wasn't in Godsmack. So, to be able to pay for a house and my kids and whatever, it's like I thank my lucky stars that I'm in Godsmack because, Sully Erna is like it's his vision. He's the one that dreams the songs, and it's his thing. So, and I'm super creative, you know what I mean? And I've always wrote lyrics all my life. I have my notebooks from when I was 15 and started writing lyrics and poems or whatever, lyrics mainly. But I have all my notebooks even, and I just always write lyrics. And then when I came into Godsmack 18 years ago, Sully made it real clear that he writes the lyrics, and he's one of those singers that he's a great emoter of words, I think, and that's why the band's successful. He's touched people he can like emote it, and you feel his pain, and the lyrics he writes are always like self-reflective of what's going on in his life. If he's has his heart broke, you're going to know it in a song, and it's real, you know. So we've touched people and we've sold records, right? Well, what happened was I can't then write lyrics, you know, and so I needed an outlet, or else I was go crazy, right? And so let me get back to my point. I talk in circles, man. You all got to bear with me.
You're good.
I'm stoned, and so, but yeah. So the Apocalypse put the record out with, and the 3 month build up that you like when you hire a publicist, they want the record 3 months, and they give you a release date, right? And you promote this record. And what they do is they do some campaigns. They do all that stuff, you know, where they spend X amount of the money you gave them on, social media promotion, and then X amount, I guess, at print press and in the rest of the world, whatever it is that they spend your money to promote your shit and it's a lead up. So they have, like, we made lyric videos, which are badass, trippy as hell, by the way. If you want to see Apocalypse Blues on YouTube or whatever, the revival videos, there's like 5 of them we made. And so we release them like every 2 weeks or whatever, so that into the lead up, all this big build up. And at the end of the day, we didn't meet any of the projections that we were trying to hit, like whatever it was, 200,000 hits on Spotify and all these things that were goals that they had. And pretty much with the record we gave them, they were excited. They really believed they could do all that. And then this was October, November, December. And the country went to shit on us. And next thing you know, it was blacks against whites and Trump against Biden. And that became our world. Like the whole world, it became, and not to mention a worldwide pandemic and 100,000 people dying around us, whatever. All this shit happened. And here they are trying to promote a side project blues psychedelic rock band. And they're like, they couldn't. So, I guess it's clickbait. It's about shit like that, right? So, like, if they put an ad up that says, the new album, Shannon Larkin of Godsmack's thing, the Apocalypse Blues Revival, out now, and then for click here or whatever, the clickbait thing, and then it comes up, that Seattle's on fire, and or the cops just killed some innocent dude, a hero, and or whatever the fucking news was, you know what I mean? And so we're trying to compete with the world, like literally nothing I've ever seen in my lifetime, you know what I mean? The 2020. And so anyway, we're kind of like starting over now and pretending like, okay, the record just came out. We were finally able to play shows last weekend. We went out and played, and it was killer. And so like life has just started over, really. Like we hit a big fucking rewind, restart, boom, now we're pretending the record just came out. So what we've done is we did 3 shows to kind of warm up. We hadn't played together since Halloween of 2020. And we all took mushrooms and had a party at my house.
Hell yeah.
Sounds awesome.
It was an amazing party, man. And we crammed like 30 people in my rehearsal room, which is only like 30 by 30, and jam for everybody, all tripping. It was rad. But so anyway, we're with that very same room. I have a really trippy rehearsal room, and it's just really rad looking. And anyway, so we brought in Hello Productions. It's Paris Vizone and Eric Rogers, and these dudes, work for Godsmack too. And so Paris is like amazing photographer. Takes a lot of. I met her through Godsmack, and she's a videographer, and she did our Under Your Scars video in Godsmack or whatever. And she's great, and she's also she's a real cool chick. She's real alternative. I knew she would get, what we're doing. However, they had done 39 live streams already in the company, and they do it in Nashville where her and Eric live at this, when they have like a studio, a soundstage, And I was like, yeah, can you do it, at my crib where it's rad and you'll feel like you're tripping? And she's like, yeah, we'll do that. So we did this production company's first mobile live stream from my studio, which is, endearingly call the Apocalyptic Ant Farm.
That sounds amazing.
Right?
So let me push it, man. July 8th, music from the Apocalyptic Ant Farm. And it's the band, the four of us live, and everything you hear, it's not a live stream. In other words, we're not playing live when the people sign on. But I can assure you, we played live in that room, and we played the whole album plus a bonus song that we have that's killer called "Can't Win for Losing," but real heavy bluesy number. But we only replayed one song. There was only one real mistake where we thought, and we had the luxury of not going out live. And if had we gone out live, we could have. It was just a couple notes butchered that Tony had actually forgot to come in. He thought it was a 4 count, but it was a 2 count. So it went 1, 2, 2, and he didn't go bang. And so we're like, oh. So, but yeah, in that situation, we knew that we were going to sell this thing not as a live stream, live band. But I would like to say that we did play because see, I have a sampler behind my kit, and it's a Yamaha drum machine with like these 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 pads, and then 9 pads total, and I can program all the sounds from like the record. Like, so if you've heard our record, like I'll do these trippy in the thing. I produced it, and so when like I did some manipulation on the voices on the delays. Like when it goes, no matter what you believe, then you'll hear believe, believe, believe. That kind of shit. Well, when I manipulated that in the studio for the record, then after the record's done, I go into the studio and solo that stuff out and sample it and then put it in my box, right? So it's like Rush used to say, like, we don't play to click tracks. There's no click tracks, no backing tapes. But I've sampled, like I hired on the record, the Apocalyptic Angels. There were these 3 chicks that sang perfect harmony together. And so I had these like parts where I screamed set, the God and light and whatever. Everyone's a star, a Crowley statement is all in the beginning of the record, right? And I had these 3 chicks make a little choir for me. So at the end, I sampled them just solo and put them in my box so that when we play, these girls are there with us. But it's me actually having to hit the drum machine pad, boom, and fire the sample off. So I wanted to make sure that everybody knows we're not playing the tape and the click tracks in our ears, none of that shit. And if you see those things in my ears, I can hear my drum machine. And then, it goes out like when we play live through the PA. So I can control all the effects. We don't have yet a keyboard player to play the Hammond B3 like in the record, and so I took some stabs from it, like in Can't Shake the Blues, 4th song on the record, where it comes in, and he's wailing on the Hammond B3. So I just sampled them. So you'll hear that shit when you see this live stream, like it, but just know I'm playing that. I'm firing it from the samples, live in real time, not to a click track, no tapes running. So it is a live performance. And then after that, then they asked me, hey man, because I meditate and stuff, whatever. And they're like, can you lead a meditation? And I was like, I meditate every day. I can try to talk while I'm doing it. And, and so it turned out I did that. And they're selling like a VIP package where and Shane and Brian are behind me, my singer and bass player, these big, beautiful men. And we're sitting there just taking you through a breathing technique, the golden ball and all that shit. And it's really cool. And then we're going to do a Q&A, I think, also. And then we're going to make these big announcements. And I got a couple big announcements for the Apocalypse Blues Revival, man. I want to tell you so bad. I can't. We got to wait.
July 8th, right? Is that what you said? Is that when that's happening?
We're going to do a sweepstakes. I can say that much, and give something away. Shane, our singer, and I'll throw a hint. He's got a bunch of really cool vintage cars and motorcycles, right? And that he works on and whatever, cool cars and motorcycles. So we're gonna make an announcement, and we're gonna do some shit. It's gonna be cool. It's gonna be cool.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
That's amazing.
So have you always played drums then, or did you start off doing something else and then move to drums?
No, I've always played drums, and you know I can claim I'm one of the few musicians I know that can claim I've never worked. So you know when I started playing clubs when I was 13, and I grew up in West Virginia. So my father, you couldn't in West Virginia you couldn't work the clubs and or get a work permit. I mean to work the clubs until you were 16. So from 13 to 16, those 3 years or 2 years of 13 and 14, my dad, bless his heart, Notre Dame grad. You know, he was an engineer. He was nothing, you know, but he was in my hero in ways, but he wasn't like a rocker guy or whatever. But he would go to the clubs and turn his hearing aids off. And in these little clubs that I'd play on the weekends in West Virginia, I could see my old man in the back sleeping. He'd be sitting up in a booth sleeping, but at the age, man, so I could play rock and roll at that young age. So obviously, you know, wherever he's at right now, kudos to my old man for being so fucking cool, man. You know. Anyway, my mom was cool too. If my dad couldn't do it, my mom would come in. But for those 2 years, yeah, I played drums, but that's all I've ever done. And you know, by the time I was 16, my band it was called Wrathchild, right? And we played where I grew up in West Virginia was on the Eastern Panhandle. So if you look at the state of West Virginia on a map, it looks just like this. It does. It might be this way. The Eastern all right, yeah, it looks like that on a map for real. And so up here at the top is Morgantown, where the college is, where your middle finger is. And then I grew up here on the thumb on the Eastern Panhandle. Well, here and here, oops, here and here, yeah, is Washington, D.C. and Baltimore. And so an hour and a half away in a car were two major cities with music scenes. And so my band, Rothschild, we started in West Virginia and like Hagerstown and Frederick, Maryland, and Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, in that tri-state area. But as soon as we started, getting better and putting people in the clubs and we got an agent, next thing you know, we took Baltimore. And then by 1988, we got signed to Atlantic Records, toured with Testament, played shows with Slayer and Metallica and Megadeth, all this shit, man. We were in that scene, We didn't make it. Put out 2 records on Atlantic, got dropped, stayed together, did this band, changed our name. Same 4 guys, been together 12 years by that point. Believed in each other, loved each other. And so we stayed together, got dropped, so we changed our name to Souls at Zero and went a heavier direction, so it was heavier. And so, that we put 2 records out on that, and then I left the band and I went to California and I joined a band called Ugly Kid Joe. Ugly Kid Joe had some major hit. They just sold millions of records.
I know that band.
Yeah. And so, I didn't play on the Everything About You or Cats in the Cradle record, the big one. I came in after that and we made a record called Menace to Sobriety. And it was fun. I mean, we toured with Van Halen. We did all this cool shit. So it was like a learning experience for me. And it taught me as a drummer also to Dave Fortman and Whit and Klaus and Cordell. They taught me, Wrathchild was a crazy thrash metal band. And so, my drumming changed drastically when I joined Ugly Kid Joe. Now they taught me how to play like for the song. You know what I mean? Like you don't need to do this and step on the vocal, and we don't need, and I just rediscovered like a lot of the shit that I listened to from my parents growing up, the Creedence and Stones and Beatles and Who and all the classic rock stuff. I went through another phase of that, which was the first music I heard in my life. And although my parents weren't musicians, they, my dad would always be like, we're not going to go and sit and watch the boob tube, we call it, we're going to go down the basement. So we go down the basement and they play records and we dance around, me and my sister and my mom and dad, And it's the same place when I got my first drum set that I set my drum set down in that basement. And then they come down and dance and play records. And I'd tap along on this drum, teach myself to all those bands. Well, it wasn't until Ugly Kid Joe, because the punk rock scene, I'll show my age again, but the punk rock scene, and I missed I was too young for the Sex Pistols and the Ramones at first. But by the time like 1980, 1981 came around, then I discovered Ramones and Black Flag, and there was this the whole new punk scene was coming out with DOA and Circle Jerks, and on the East we had the Misfits and the Bad Brains and Minor Threat, and all this shit was coming out, blowing my mind. So I kind of, I was a teenager, so all the old classic rock kind of phased out, and man, I was on the cusp. I had the No Life to Leather Metallica demo, and we were trading cassette tapes back then, man. I found this band Nuclear Assault in New York City, had their demo, knew their drummer, sent the fucking that thing, traded it, got this band Metallica from California and all this shit. Really, before metal, it was that was my scene, man, and Rothschild scene, and in the early days when thrash was developing, before the crossover and metal and punk, and God, I remember like going to Black Flag in 1984, my war tour. Rollins was in the band by then, and I had long ass hair, down to my tits, and when they started, they opened up with my war, and I couldn't help it. I jumped in that pit, man, and all the skinheads. Growing up in West Virginia, we didn't have the stigma that the major cities had. Like, we didn't know that Mohawks weren't supposed to like long hairs, and long hairs weren't supposed to like skinheads, and everybody, you don't go to Cro-Mag's fucking show if you have long hair. I didn't know that shit. I'd jump in the pit, come out with a bloody fucking nose. You know what I mean? It was brutal, but I'll never forget it, and it changed my life, that whole scene. But it wasn't until Ugly Kid Joe that I really came back to the classic rock thing and learned how to play the drums, for the song, and started writing music, learning. I just taught myself the bass guitar, and not I couldn't play in a band. I don't have the talent as a bass player or something, and that was never the intent. The intent was to use it as a tool. I didn't want to. Guitar has too many strings. You know what I mean?
Sad that you cut your hair in the comments. They're like, you cut your hair.
Yeah. Hey. Yeah. It'll grow back, I guess. I don't know. I'm getting old. It might fall out. I don't fucking know. You never know, right?
That does happen. That does happen.
Yeah.
So, how did you end up in Godsmack?
Well, in the band Wrathchild, it was about, I'd say we're not sure, Sully and I, about this, but it was 86 or 87, and he had moved from Boston down to, his mom had moved, so he went and left Lawrence, Massachusetts, and moved to, I think it was Fayetteville, North Carolina, or it might have been whatever. But I used to see him, so I met him in the Carolinas at Wrathchild shows. And the first time I met him, the first time he saw me play, his friend Todd, who was in his band Lex Luthor, he was the bass player, said, "Man, you got to come." When he moved down there, Rothschild was playing the clubs down there, and he's like, "You got to come see this guy Shannon Larkin, dude." So him and they called their friend Reed Mullen, the drummer of Corrosion of Conformity, and Sully Erna and Corrosion of Conformity's Reed Mullen came with this guy Todd to watch Rothschild and see me play, and then, God, Lex Luthor ended up from that wanting. They knew the club and they were the local band, so they got the opening gig the next time Rothschild played. So then I saw Sully Erna play, and in the bands back then, man, you had to play covers. So like you would play multiple sets, and the club owner, they'd give you a list even if you didn't play, Highway to Hell or whatever. They didn't want you at their club. It was weird, and so. But as you start to get crowds and start to be hot and whatever, now next thing you know, you're getting paid good and you have some power. So we would we'd play a couple covers and then put an original in. So that's how it happened. That's how you did it back then. World's vastly different than the 80s. But so Sully, Lex Luthor opens for Rothschild at the Attic in North Carolina somewhere. The club is called the Attic. I'll never forget it because I was like, whoa, and he's really a great drummer, and he really is. And I was like, God damn. And so we ended up, I'm like, hey, what's up, And he ended up coming back to my hotel room that night, and we partied all night, and there was lots of 80s stuff involved I won't even mention. And next thing you know, we traded numbers. Well, from 86, 87 on, every time, and by the way, the band broke up Lex Luthor, and Sully moved back to Boston, right? and we had kept in touch. So he told me I'm back in Boston. And so every time Rothschild would play Boston, like Sully, I remember one time came early to take me away and so I could do my laundry, shit like that. We just have always been friends. We became friends. 20 years before Godsmack or whatever. And at the end of the day, I I got a call, from some management company, and they said, "Hey, we're looking for a drummer for this band that just signed to Epic Records called Malaya Rage." You guys remember them?
Yeah, I do.
Malaya Rage, man, a heavy band from the '90s or whatever. And so by then, yeah, it was like 90, 91 maybe or something like that. And so I go, yeah, I know this dude, Sully Erna, right? And he got the gig. So I hooked him up back then with this badass band from Boston that had a major label record deal, right? And then, he went on to play with a different band on Warner Brothers. But so he did a couple of major label records. Well, we kind of, I don't know, we didn't drift apart, but we were that kind of thing where we would talk to each other once or twice a year for over that decade. And Godsmack came out, and I remember uh firstly, Sully had sent me their demo, All Wound Up it was called. And it was the first record, but they hadn't added voodoo to it yet. And I think it had one less song or whatever, and it had this chick on the front of it that was all wrapped in like looked like recording tape, like 2-inch tape, and she was with like this big, looked like glam rock hair on this chick, and she was all wrapped in tape, and it said All Wound Up, and I was kind of like, you know, whatever, and I played it, and I was like, it's pretty cool, and at the time, and he at the time got, by the way, Godsmack uh, had sold like literally, I don't know, 10,000 of these things at shows in Boston, just out of the trunk of their car. And then WAAF got on the band and started playing Keep Away on the radio. And the thing kind of started blowing up, right? And so now Sully's calling me going, dude, they have every major label sniffing around and all this shit. And I had just joined this band, Amen, this punk band from Los Angeles. And this dude, Ross Robinson, he's a famous producer, and he had discovered Korn. You know what I mean? He was the guy, like the whole Adidas thing, Korn, and him. That was all Ross and those dudes. And he just signed Limp Bizkit. Anyway, so he was this big guy producer on the scene, and he was with Roadrunner Records, which wasn't a major yet, right? But they were a big independent. The biggest independent was Roadrunner. So Ross does this rad deal with Roadrunner and gets to sign a couple bands. So he signs Amen, my band, and Slipknot from Idaho, right? So like Slipknot, we met all those guys, and we recorded our record, and at the studio that Korn did their first record in Malibu, right? It burned down since, but so we were up there in Indigo Ranch, it was called, and Slipknot, all 9 of them, the original band, they all show up 2 days early to California. They'd driven a van over or whatever, and there was living quarters at the studio in Malibu. So there was this big, a separate house like that the bands all stayed in as they're recording in the studio in Malibu too. In California, it's really a beautiful place, right? And it's up at this mountain anyway. So we meet all the Slipknot guys, and this was like the year 2000 or 99 even. And so we were still partying, and we partied so hard, and they took us, both records came out, Amen and Slipknot blew up, as they deserved to. And we didn't sell shit. We were punk rock. We wouldn't even, Casey Chaos, the singer, wouldn't even, if it sounded anything that like Roadrunner would looking for something to put on the radio, he would change it. Like he was a true punk. He still is. Punk rocker. Punk rocker. Not punk ass, punk rocker. This dude's the real his life. Anyway, so Slipknot though, like totally took Amen under their wing and took us all over the world in the next 2 years, man. As their rise to fame, they just took us everywhere. That's where I got the name Apocalypse, man. I was drinking so hard, and I've been sober for 5 years. I had a problem. I went to rehab and all that shit. But it all started. My apocalyptic days were on that Slipknot world tour for like 6 months, man. And Joey Jordison, the original drummer, my bro, and he would say, "Oh, here comes the apocalypse," when I'd come stumbling into their party, and everybody go, "Oh shit," because I was that guy. I might fall over break your lamp or some shit. But he gave me that nickname, and I that way back then, I got this apocalypse tattoo. It says apocalypse, but that was back in 2001. Wait, the apocalypse blues wasn't even a glimmer in my eye yet. But that was from Joey Jordison, Slipknot. Here comes the apocalypse! Look out!
That's awesome.
That is
Isn't that
awesome.
crazy? But yeah, man. And then from there, Amen got dropped from Roadrunner, but we stayed with Ross Robinson, and Ross Robinson took his imprint label at Roadrunner and I guess moved it to Warner Brothers, right? So Amen, this punk band who sold like, I don't know, 10,000 records on Roadrunner or whatever, we turn around and get dropped by Roadrunner and then signed to Virgin Records and go to England and whatever. It was a cool, like, Sex Pistols-esque story for punk rock, to get totally dropped and then swindle another label for all this money. And then the single Casey wrote, it was called The Price of Reality, and in the chorus, the hook of the song, his commercial, the one song that they wanted for the radio, the hook went, "Abortion candy machine. What is the price of reality?" Right? And so the label Virgin was like, the song's really good, and we think we can get this thing played, maybe on MTV and the radio, if you just change the line "abortion candy machine." And Casey fucking Chaos, nope, not doing it. And so, unfortunately, because then, we didn't get any play and the record didn't sell and blah, blah, blah. And then that was the end of Amen for me. And I made a couple more records with Casey Chaos under the moniker Amen. But, I at the time, I had just also, Amen was an extremely violent band and experience. And I'm not joking. Like, I mean, Casey was really, mad, insane, and like nicest guy you'd ever meet off stage or whatever, but on stage, and he just would claim to lose his mind. But after shows, we take him to the hospital. I mean, for broken ankles and from jumping off the PA and a cutter. So he'd smash vodka, chug a vodka bottle, smash it, and then just slice himself to ribbons. To where after the show, hospital stitches, 60 stitches, shit like that. It was a crazy band to be in. And every show we ever did, some part of my set was gone, man. He would come and just grab my tom or a cymbal stand, throw it in the crowd. Lawsuits. It was crazy, man. It was a crazy band. So after 5 years, and 2 records and world toured with this band, Amen, I retired. I was like, I've done it all my life. By the way, in between, I did session work and played like with Glassjaw, and I played on their Worship and Tribute album, and played with Black Sabbath. I got to play with Ozzy and Tony and Geezer one time. Mike Borden had, he was with Faith No More, and Bill Ward was still fat. And he couldn't do this Black Sabbath reunion, Sabbath getting back together, and Bill Ward couldn't play the songs because he was too fat and old. He later on, he lost the weight later to be in the band. So anyway, they get Mike Borden, right? And Mike Borden, though, Faith No More was still going, man. They had just put out fucking King for a Day. They were still raging. And so Mike Borden was just doing it for the love of Sabbath and Ozzy, of course. And so Ozzy always blows out his voice, and he'll cancel at least one show a tour, right? And so he canceled, and they had to. It was in Ohio, and the crowd, when they announced 10 minutes before he's supposed to go on, Ozzy can't sing tonight. Well, the crowd fucking rioted and made the news. They're turning cars over, burning shit. Ozzy fans, right? Sabbath fans. So they had to announce a makeup date right away. So they were coming back on whatever the date was, July 9th. And then Michael Borden realizes I can't come back and play the makeup show. I'm off with Faith No More, and I have to go tour with Faith No More. So I got the call because I knew Robert Trujillo, who at the time was with. When I met Robert, he was in Suicidal Tendencies, and then he went on to get the Ozzy gig, right? And so he's like, I know this guy, and honestly, they had tried to call Josh Freese, the great Josh Freese, what a drummer, and Josh Freese turned it down, playing with Black Sabbath for that show. And when I finally met Josh years later at a show, and I saw him, and I'm like, that's Josh. And I ran up. I'd met him briefly before, and I ran up and I said, "Hey, Josh, man," I go, "Thank you for turning down Sabbath. That was the second call, and got to play with Black Sabbath, who to me growing up, that was like." It was like playing on stage with a bunch of fucking unicorns. Like they're like unreal. They're like
That was awesome.
they're like gods, or they're not real. And so I go, thank you for making that dream come true. Can I ask you why? He goes, well, the same way you feel about Black Sabbath, I had another call, and it was Devo. And he goes, Devo was my Black Sabbath. So I turned down the Sabbath to do Devo. And I'm like, no shit. It just shows the difference. Like he's a California kid. I'm East Coast, West Virginia, or whatever. Black Sabbath, Devo. It was fucking just weird. And he's still with Devo, by the way, to this day. He does Perfect Circle, of course. He's played on probably more. Anyways, it's not about Josh, but what an outstanding human gave me the opportunity to play with Black Sabbath. By one word. Nope.
That's awesome.
Never knew Devo. But anyway, I did them. I toured with Candlebox, played drums for Kevin Martin and Pete Clatt for a while. And I was in Amen at that time too. And our manager was the same manager as Candlebox. And their drummer had flipped out and left the band 2 weeks before the tour. No one knew where he was. So they were panicking. And my manager, we had just finished that Virgin record, the second record with Amen. And so Virgin needed that 3-month setup time. Like I was telling you, in the Apocalypse, our setup time was in the Apocalypse. And so it didn't work. But so they needed 3 months. So Amen had off and I could do it. And I said, yeah, man, if they'll, have me, why? I like Candlebox, I'd never even seen them live, but the songs on the radio, I love that. Don't you put your jaws in my face or I'm going to punch in your face. Fuck you. I don't want it anymore. I was like, yeah. And that was one of the funnest tours, man. And then what else? After that, fuck. Now I'll finally get to the question. So how did I get in Godsmack? See how I work? I talk in circles, man. But
no, we like hearing the stories. That's what it's all about, is getting to hear that stuff.
But I'm getting back to it. So at the end of that Amen run, after 5 years, and like I said, doing a bunch of other cool things, like I did a Vanilla Ice record when he made a heavy record, comeback record.
I remember that.
Ice, baby. I played drums and all that. The whole record, yeah. And it's a fantastic record, man. But what an experience, a whole nother story. But we watched this tarantula wasp battle of tarantula, and it was a trippy shit. Same place, Malibu, Ross Robinson, same scene, man. It was crazy doing that Vanilla Ice thing. So anyway, after that, I end up, having my daughter. My wife and I had the daughter, my ex-wife now, but at the time, my wife and I had a daughter, and I'm in this band that after every show, I'm hurt. My drums are broken. I'm broken. I'm bleeding. And I'm like, am I a fucking punk rocker now? I'm like, I was like 36 or something and newly married with a child. And I was like, you know what? And so I quit Amen face to face with Casey. It was a hard thing to do, but because I loved that band, by the way, and I loved Case Chaos, and I loved the whole band, Paul Figg, Sonny Mayo, Toomer, John Feinstock, Snot was in the house. It was a great band, but anyway, it was violent, drugs, alcohol. I had to get out of that. And so I retired from music. I'm like, my mom was a hairdresser. And I was like, I can be a hairdresser. And my mom, it was kind of like being an entertainer. Like I would see, and my mom had a shop in our basement, right? And where I learned to play drums, my mom ended up building this hair salon, Bonnie's Hair Harbor, in our basement, and put a couple of stations in there. And I ran around the neighborhood putting flyers up and all that shit. So anyway, I got to grow up watching my mom be a hairdresser and make all these people so happy. And people would come in and give her money, and she'd cut their hair, and they'd hug her and say, "Oh, thank you. Oh, I love it." And I'm like, people come to see me play, give me money, and say, "Oh, thank you. I love it." And so it's kind of the same thing. Musician, hairdresser. And my wife is like, "Yeah, that's cool." She didn't marry me because I wasn't famous. I wasn't a rock star. I'd been in bands and played all that shit and played with Sabbath, but I didn't have any money, and I had nothing except my wife and kid in a one-bedroom apartment in a 6'4" Impala. And I was in California, and so where the rent was $1,200 a month for a one-bedroom, so I had to do something. So I enlist. I had like 6-7 grand saved for Miami, and I was making about 40 grand a year with Amen. That's it. And so to live, we were on food stamps, me and my wife, to get milk and cheese and shit. This is real. And so at the time, I'm like, fuck it, I got to do some real work. I got to finally get a job. And all these years, and so I enrolled in this cosmetology school, in Santa Barbara, California. And literally 2 weeks later, the phone rang, and my wife picked it up in the kitchen, and it was Sully Erna. And there was no announcement. That, in fact, they hadn't even fired Tommy yet. And when she said it's Sully Erna, and I just quit Amen 2 weeks before that, by the way, and people think and that know me that I quit Amen to join Godsmack and sold out to the bigger band. I quit Amen for way different reasons, and 2 weeks before I even got the call. So and months before I joined, because the call was, "Hey man, me and Tommy are like this. I'm unhappy, and it's my band, and I can't write song. I can't. I got to get rid of this guy. Will you join? Will you come and play with Godsmack?" By this time, keep in mind, they sold 7 million records, right? So he made it. My bro made it, and was like, they were big and badass, and it was still on the up, So I was like, shit, man. I can't. I can't. He said, just come and jam, and I'm like, I can't do it. When you fire Tommy, if and when you fire your drummer, then I will come and play with your band. And shit, 2 weeks later, man, he called and said, it is done. What do you need, And I'm like, well, send me the song, send me the music. And he like, I didn't even have a cell phone. He's like, well, give me your cell number. I'm like, I don't have a cell phone. This was like 2002. And I still didn't have a cell phone. I'm like, I don't have a cell phone, dude. You can call me at home. He goes, no, if you're going to be in my band, Godsmack, you need a cell phone. And he goes, and so we like the Motorola ones, whatever. They were flip phones, and they could use them as walkie-talkies, all this shit. And I'm like, whatever, man. I don't have money. He's like, I'll send you one. And he goes, and I'm going to send you a DVD of the live. It was from the second the Wake record, and they put out a live DVD. It's just so you could see how the songs translate live and what we look like in concert. I'd never even seen them, And so, oh, that's not true. I saw him once before that at a festival, and so I didn't really get to see him. Anyway, I go, I don't have a DVD player. he's like, really, dude? I'm like, yeah, I still rock the VHS or whatever. I was poor. And so the next day he overnighted a Motorola cell phone and a DVD player in the Godsmack Live, and said, yeah. And I had like, I learned it all. And then I went, and his only stipulation, he's like, dude, it's not an audition, because he had seen me in Ratchet. I mean, he was a fan of me and my playing, and we knew each other. We were friends. Like I said, we'd only talk once a year or so, but we were still friends. And so he said, it's not an audition. I want you in the band, but it's my band and I am the leader, but I'm still I run it like a democracy. So as long as Tony and Robbie like you and you guys can get along and write together, then you're in the band, and we won't audition anybody else. And so I was like, I met Tony, shook his hand once, and met Robbie briefly at that one show I saw him at. And I was actually with Candlebox, and Candlebox was opening for Godsmack at a festival, but there was like 10 bands. So I met him very briefly. And I do remember, though, at that show that the band, including Tommy, were behind me when I was playing in Candlebox. And I was kind of like, because in Candlebox, I couldn't really be the Wrathchild America beast that, and I knew Sully was probably saying, you got to see this fucking guy play. And then here I'm playing, Candlebox, which wasn't as aggressive and all, but, whatever. It ended up, I went to Boston, he flew me to Boston, and I went, they were in Lawrence, Massachusetts, where Sully grew up. And it was so hot. It was summer. And I went in there, man, and Tony and Robbie were like, awesome. And we ended up starting to write this riff. And then Sully's like, I'm going to go piss off for a while and just get some food or whatever. You guys hang out. And we continued, and we ended up writing like the blueprint of Straight Outta Line, which ended up being the first single on that record, and a number one single. And that was our first number one record, by the way, which is pretty cool. You know what I mean? Because they had sold so many records. But when I joined them, we made that record, and it was our first number one album, and it was so surreal because it was like fucking Godsmack. And number two was Justin Bieber. And I was like, oh, Justin Bieber, right? I fucking made it, man.
As long as you're ahead of Bieber, then it's all good.
Life is made at that point.
It's all definitely good. Well, we about ran out of time. What would you like to plug? Where can they find all your music? Where can they get merch? All that good stuff.
Yeah, apocalypsebluesrevival.com. And I'd just like to plug that we are going to do a live stream on July 8th, the band film live. But the live part of it, we're doing a Q&A and thanks for having me on. And you guys didn't get to say much or ask much questions.
That's okay.
Hey, we're here for the stories. All right? That's what we're here for.
Well, I got stories. If you ever want me back on, I just barely scratched the tip of the iceberg. I got rock and roll stories, man. It's so funny.
We'll definitely have you back, Shannon.
Awesome. And thanks
thank you.
Thanks for having me on, man. I love the look of your show.
Thank you.
Very apocalyptic. I like it.
Thank you. If you want to hang out through the outro, we'll talk to you.
Okay. Yeah. So hang out?
Yeah, just hang out. Thanks, guys, for watching.
Thank you.
Fuck you. When I'm screaming, fuck you. Middle finger in the air, and all I wanted to hear was you screaming. Fuck you too. I'm out of the stratosphere in a brand new atmosphere. I wanna go and shoot to the campus clear, cause I never thought I would've made it out of here alive. From the land where the people with the evil and night ride. You'll never see an equal to my kind, so blind to anything to line the life to mind is right now. Looking for another mind to fight out, bringing everything that you can bring down to the ground like 150 pounds of C4, looking for keyboard thugs. Well, I'ma need more slugs, cause I wanna see more blood. You ain't never seen gold like us. They don't wanna make them any more like us. Put them on tour with the paint on, hoping that anybody can know your little lane song. Fuck right, I'ma stay wrong. Black out with a ray gun, looking for anybody to make up. Motherfuckers really need to wake up. There's nothing really you can say. It's never gonna change my mind. I'm on some fuck that shit today. Fuck it, I don't care. Middle fingers in the air. Only careless up in here. Only careless up in here. Fuck it, I don't care. Middle fingers in the air. Only careless up in here. Only careless up in here.
Fuck that! I said fuck this shit. I was born a son of a bitch and always talk a whole gang of shit. Even know that I wouldn't work spit. Now till I became a pastor. Whole world revel in the wake of my dad disaster. Had to talk to a pastor. Told me sit down, hand him a shit and try to figure out what the fuck's really the matter. Ain't none of my city, only big ass wicked is the last victim from your own personal premises. I never know peace is an emphasis. Therefore cover up all my scars and all my blemishes. These men exit out of entrance.